Lately, we were talking a lot about how to work with conventional fear, anxiety in the last weeks, I think. And just recently, a student from Sweden wrote an email admitting her own panic fear in regard to contracting the virus through her work as a nurse in the front line. And Van Schutting gave a wonderful BBC, wonderful insight how she recommends to work with that situation. She recommended how to practice and how she herself practiced in circumstances that are fear-provoking, and brought up personal examples. I would like to talk a little bit more about that topic, but more from the perspective how to identify fear. Fear that disturbs our mind, that leads to a loss of stability of mind and its quality, and a fear that captivates the mind. So fear can be very obvious to people, such as to the student from Sweden. She experienced sleepless night, loss of appetite, constant thoughts around the topic, the fear-provoking object or situation. But fear can be also more subtle. And I'm not talking here about Buddhist fear of ignorance that we have in our mind, and the hindrances that we may experience due to our ignorance. I'm talking about more fear, such as that is very obvious, more gross, such as panic fear, where we have these physical reactions due to, for example, fear of getting sick and dying. So some people may think that they actually have realistic fear, or they just act on automatic and are not aware that fear is driving their action. We had just an example here in our community 3 weeks ago, where we thought one member of us may have the virus. And so then we took action, and our Maha nurse, Valma Jigma, isolated a section here at the Abbey, and then she herself had to go in isolation. So then some of us were left with, what do we do now? And we formed a little group and tried to plan out everything in detail for when we would get the virus here. And so Vanama Jigma then received this mass of emails with questions and suggestions, comments, and that was an indicator that there was probably not just rational fear, not just logical mind going on, but maybe a little bit more anxiety than we wanted to admit in the beginning. And therefore, I thought to talk a little bit more how to identify fear, how to distinguish fear from being realistic. But first of all, I'd like to repeat what Valma Sangye Kato some days in a BBC pointed out as well, that fear itself is not through and through negative. Fear of suffering and its causes can lead to more mindfulness. We can use fear to develop more qualities in the Dharma, and it can be good for insight and development. But if we reject fear, if we don't realize our fear because we think it's a weakness, then it could get even bigger. Pressure and despair may develop. But if we identify our fear, it will become easier for us to work with it. And we can use it to develop mindfulness, insight, compassion. If we see fear clearly, then we can take it on the path to develop our mental qualities. So I think following behaviors could be some indicators that we have more fear than being actually realistic. And that are factors that I could identify within myself, and probably you have many more, and there are many more. For example, thinking a lot about the future, so like playing out what if one Abbey resident has the virus and so on, and then continue playing it all out, but more in a negative sense. Losing track of what is actually present here in the moment. Yeah, I'm thinking about the situation and making the worst case scenario again and again and again, and then I'm sitting at lunch, somebody's in front of me. I don't even recognize this person. I don't even think about something, how to now interact with that person and what's going on with that person. I'm totally within myself. I space out, or I'm sitting in front of the computer and have a task to accomplish, but actually my mind is somewhere else and my task never gets accomplished on that day. So the mind is also too disturbed to meditate, to focus on the actual topic. I'm sitting down, setting a motivation, but actually motivation is already so weak because I'm totally occupied by all these other thoughts, by my fear-driven thoughts. I have a tendency to watch and listen to news that are more stimulating my anxiety even more. I want to feed my anxiety even more because maybe it's part of my identity now. And afflictions such as anger and attachment could increase. I'm overstimulated, so I have not the amount of stability I need in my mind to actually recognize what's going on within myself and to control myself. Feeling tired as a result of too much worry. Maybe even feeling like getting sick. May even develop some phantom pain, or such as throat ache or chest pain. Thinking maybe I have the virus. Loss of appetite. Turning my mind too much into that situation, or I have now the virus and I'm getting really sick inside myself and then losing appetite. And distracting behavior such as overeating or too much use of entertainment, and generally feeling unhappy. So just some examples I identified within myself, and you can think of your own. Thinking realistically instead brings a more peaceful mind. I feel happier. I'm able to focus on what is actually right in front of me. Basically the opposite of what I have mentioned. One student of ours, one friend of ours, Heather Duscher, she shared with me how she works to identify fear of and its opposite of being rather realistic, and she agreed upon that I share her example with all of you. She said, when she is more in a fearful state of mind, my mind is spinning over and over on the same things, obsessed with whatever it is. When there's more realistic fear, I'm far more sober. A recent example is that I was trying to decide whether or not to have Sophie's brain tumor removed. Sophie is her dog. What if she died during the surgery? I could hardly look at her without crying. I was so upset. I thought about it all the time, and I was obsessed with what the right decision was. I was terrified of losing her to the point that I almost decided not to treat her at all. Eventually, I realized I wasn't being realistic. If she didn't die on the operation table, she would die in a week or month or year. But she was going to die. My time with her was never to be forever, and there was never going to be a time when it hurt less. Now or later, it was going to happen, and it was then I was able to make a decision that was in her best interest and not just a reaction to my fear. I worry about her. I'm sad, and I'm afraid of losing her. But there's more wisdom, more calm, and more focus on what I can do for her in whatever time we have left. By the way, on Monday, Sophie's tumor has been successfully removed. So Sophie is home again. So this was a very good attitude towards the suffering she experienced. And Heather was able to use her fear in a constructive way. And that's exactly what bodhisattvas are striving to do. Bodhisattvas learn to see such situations as a chance to develop patience, equanimity, great compassion. And we can't learn how to be patient when everything around us is nice, kind, and always perfect. So what he said was, see challenges as a good opportunity. And even on a more secular level, there are powerful ways to approach this very unique situation we are facing right now. There are about 4 billion people on this planet who are finding themselves in isolation, according to the news, and are confronted with, and yeah, all of us, 7 or 8 billion, are confronted with this situation that none of us has ever experienced before. And so the media is even turning to astronauts to ask them how they work with the situation of isolation, or how they work with fear, extreme fear, when they are flying out into the space or returning to the Earth. And I found that very interesting. And there's a German astronaut, Alexander Gerst, who spent altogether 2 years on ISS. And he answered to the question how he learned to work with fear in the following way. One has a tendency to have fear because one fears to lose control over a situation. Astronauts train for 1 year before their departure how to work with the worst case scenario. And then when they are in the situation, they are more prepared. They do have the feeling that they have a bit control over the situation, and that helps not to be fearful, but one must have respect. Now it's quite similar, he said. And we have a good tool to limit the spread of the virus since we all stay home. That is some control. The only difference now is that we don't know how it will continue. So we all can prepare ourselves to reduce fear through learning how to develop our mind positively and to transform it into wholesome states, and to see fear as an opportunity to develop mindfulness and perseverance. And we can improve our states of mind by identifying its states through continuous and focused meditation. Then we will grow in concentration and insight, what will actually help to work with fear. And I would like to continue what Alexander Gerst gave as a final note, what I think we can apply in all matter, and ends up in a very positive attitude. I'm very optimistic that we all together can manage that challenge. That is also something good for our community building, that we internationally work together, support each other. That is important in such times, and to look with optimism into the future. That's the most important thing, that we have a good perspective about this. That actually we didn't have the virus here. It was a false alarm. We just took pre-measure to make sure that we don't have the virus. We wanted to be careful still. So there's no virus here. Nobody got sick.